As a neurologist, this one harmless daily habit is a ticking time bomb for a massive stroke. As I write this urgent warning from my office at Johns Hopkins Neurology Institute, where I've spent the last 22 years treating devastating strokes that destroy lives in seconds, I'm haunted by a pattern so clear, so preventable, yet so tragically common, that it keeps me awake at night knowing millions of Americans are unknowingly counting down to their own neurological catastrophe. My name is Dr. Sarah Mitchell, and I'm about to reveal a daily habit that 7 out of 10 Americans engage in without realizing they're literally programming their brains for a massive, life-altering stroke that could strike at any moment, turning them from healthy, independent individuals into wheelchair-bound shells of their former selves. This habit is so normalized, so deeply embedded in our modern lifestyle, that when I tell my patients, it's slowly destroying their cerebral blood vessels and exponentially increasing their stroke risk. They look at me in disbelief, unable to accept that something so commonplace could be so deadly. But the evidence is overwhelming, the science is irrefutable, and the casualties continue to mount as I watch patient after patient wheeled into our stroke unit, their faces frozen in terror as they realize they can't speak, can't move, half their body can't even swallow their own saliva, all because of this one preventable habit. Before I reveal exactly what this ticking time bomb is, let me share a case that changed how I view this epidemic and made it my personal mission to warn every American about this hidden killer lurking in their daily routine. Last month, Jennifer Martinez, a vibrant 52-year-old marketing director and mother of 3, was brought to our emergency department by ambulance. Her entire left side paralyzed, her speech reduced to incomprehensible sounds, her eyes pleading for help as her brain cells died by the millions with each passing second. Just 4 hours earlier, Jennifer had been in a board meeting, presenting quarterly results to executives, her mind sharp, her future bright. Her family depending on her income and presence in their lives, completely unaware that a catastrophic stroke was moments away from stealing everything. Her husband, Carlos, sat in our consultation room, his hands shaking as he repeated over and over, "She was healthy, doctor. She ran marathons, she ate organic food, she did everything right. How could this happen to someone so healthy?" But as I reviewed Jennifer's medical history and questioned Carlos about her daily habits, a familiar and chilling pattern emerged, the same pattern I'd seen in hundreds of stroke victims who thought they were living healthy lives while unknowingly nurturing a deadly time bomb in their brains. Jennifer, like millions of Americans, spent 10 to 12 hours every single day engaged in the one habit that neuroscience has definitively linked to massive stroke risk, a habit she considered not just harmless, but necessary for her success and productivity. She sat. Not just sat, but sat continuously for hours at a time, often going 4 to 5 hours without standing up, without moving, without giving her blood the circulation it desperately needed to prevent the formation of deadly clots that would eventually break free and lodge in her brain. This prolonged, uninterrupted sitting, what we in the medical community now call the sitting disease, had turned Jennifer's blood vessels into a breeding ground for disaster, creating the perfect conditions for the massive stroke that has left her unable to walk, work, or care for her children. You might be thinking, but doctor, sitting can't possibly be that dangerous. Everyone sits. It's just part of modern life. And that's exactly what Jennifer thought, until she found herself trapped in a body that no longer obeyed her commands. The truth is that prolonged sitting is one of the most dangerous activities you can engage in, fundamentally altering your blood chemistry, devastating your vascular system, and creating a cascade of physiological changes that virtually guarantee a stroke if continued long enough. When you sit for extended periods, especially in the same position without movement, your blood flow slows to a crawl, particularly in your legs, where large veins struggle against gravity to return blood to your heart and brain. This sluggish circulation allows blood cells to stick together, forming tiny clots that usually dissolve when you move, but with prolonged sitting, these clots grow larger, more stable, more likely to break free and travel through your bloodstream like guided missiles aimed at your brain. Research from the American Stroke Association shows that people who sit for more than 8 hours daily have a 400% increased risk of stroke compared to those who sit less than 3 hours, with the risk climbing exponentially for every additional hour of uninterrupted sitting. But it's not just about clot formation. Prolonged sitting triggers a devastating cascade of metabolic changes that damage your blood vessels from the inside out, creating what we call endothelial dysfunction, where the delicate lining of your arteries becomes inflamed, rigid, and prone to rupture. Your body responds to prolonged sitting as if you're in a state of metabolic hibernation, dramatically reducing the production of lipoprotein lipase, an enzyme crucial for breaking down fats in your blood, leading to dangerous accumulations that clog arteries and restrict blood flow to your brain. Studies from Harvard Medical School demonstrate that just 2 hours of continuous sitting reduces blood flow to the brain by 15%, while 4 hours of sitting can reduce it by up to 30%, literally starving your brain cells of the oxygen they need to survive. The inflammation triggered by prolonged sitting doesn't just affect your blood vessels, it creates a systemic inflammatory response throughout your body, releasing cytokines and other inflammatory markers that damage the blood-brain barrier and make stroke exponentially more likely. Your hip flexors, when held in a seated position for hours, compress major blood vessels that supply your brain, creating mechanical restrictions that compound the metabolic damage and further increase stroke risk, especially in people over 40 whose vessels have lost some elasticity. The scariest part is that this damage accumulates silently over years with no warning signs until the moment a clot breaks free or a vessel ruptures, transforming an ordinary day into a life-altering catastrophe that leaves families shattered and futures destroyed. Jennifer's stroke was what we call a large vessel occlusion, where a massive clot formed in her leg during one of her marathon sitting sessions, broke free, travelled through her heart, and lodged in her middle cerebral artery, cutting off blood flow to a huge portion of her brain. By the time she reached our stroke unit, despite our most advanced interventions, including mechanical thrombectomy, where we physically removed the clot, the damage was done. Millions of brain cells had died, leaving her with permanent disabilities that no amount of rehabilitation can fully reverse. The financial devastation has been equally catastrophic, with medical bills already exceeding $850,000, her inability to work, eliminating their primary income and the need for round-the-clock care draining their savings and forcing them to sell their home. Her 3 children, ages 8, 12 and 15, now help their father care for a mother who can't dress herself, can't prepare meals, can't help with homework, can't attend their sports events, can't be the mother they desperately need during these crucial years. But here's what makes me angry, what drives me to shout this warning from every platform I can find. Jennifer's stroke was entirely preventable if she had simply known about and addressed the dangers of prolonged sitting. The solution is so simple, so accessible, yet so tragically unknown to most Americans who continue to sit their way toward a neurological disaster that will destroy everything they've worked for and everyone they love. Breaking up prolonged sitting with just 3 minutes of movement every 30 minutes has been shown to reduce stroke risk by up to 87%. Essentially eliminating the danger for most people, yet this life-saving information remains largely unknown to the public. The protocol I now recommend to all my patients, which I call the Stroke Prevention Movement Method, is based on extensive research and has helped thousands avoid Jennifer's fate, requiring no special equipment, no gym membership, just a commitment to value your brain over your inbox. First, set a timer on your phone or computer to alert you every 30 minutes during your workday, using this as a non-negotiable signal to stand up and move regardless of what task you're engaged in or how important it seems. Second, when the timer goes off, stand up immediately and perform at least 3 minutes of movement, which can be as simple as walking to the water cooler, doing desk push-ups, marching in place, or walking up and down a flight of stairs. Third, during these movement breaks, focus on activating your calf muscles through heel raises or walking, as these muscles act as a second heart, pumping blood back up from your legs and preventing the pooling that leads to clot formation. Fourth, incorporate what I call micro-movements, even while sitting, such as ankle rolls, leg extensions, and seated marches, which maintain some blood flow even when you can't take a full movement break. Fifth, invest in a standing desk or desk converter that allows you to alternate between sitting and standing throughout the day, aiming for a 50-50 split that keeps your blood flowing while still allowing focused work time. The research supporting this approach is overwhelming, with study after study showing that regular movement breaks don't just prevent strokes, but actually improve productivity, creativity, and overall work performance, destroying the myth that constant sitting equals greater output. A landmark study published in the journal Circulation followed 100,000 office workers for 10 years and found that those who took regular movement breaks had 73% fewer strokes than their constantly sitting counterparts, even after controlling for exercise outside of work. But here's the critical point that most people miss. It's not about how much you exercise outside of work hours. You can't undo 10 hours of sitting with a 30-minute gym session any more than you can undo a pack of cigarettes with a salad. Jennifer was a perfect example of this dangerous misconception, running marathons on weekends while sitting motionless for entire workdays, believing her fitness routine protected her from the vascular damage accumulating with every seated hour. The phenomenon we call active couch potato syndrome affects millions of Americans who exercise regularly but still face massive stroke risk from prolonged sitting because the damage occurs in real time and can't be reversed by delayed physical activity. Think of your blood vessels like a garden hose when water flows regularly. The hose stays flexible and clear, but let water sit stagnant for hours and sediment accumulates, the hose stiffens, and eventually catastrophic failure occurs. Your blood vessels need constant movement to maintain their flexibility and function, with even short periods of stagnation causing immediate damage that accumulates into stroke risk, especially as we age and our vessels naturally become less resilient. The modern workplace has become a stroke factory, with open office designs that discourage movement, back-to-back virtual meetings that chain people to their desks, and a culture that equates constant sitting with productivity and dedication. I regularly see executives who brag about working 12-hour days without breaks, not realizing they're essentially bragging about playing Russian roulette with their brain health each day, pulling the trigger, and hoping this isn't the day the chamber has a bullet. The technology industry is particularly deadly, with programmers and developers often sitting for 14 to 16 hours straight during crunch time, creating what we're seeing as an epidemic of strokes in people under 45 who should be decades away from such risks. One of my patients, a 38-year-old software engineer named David, suffered a massive stroke after a 20-hour coding session, leaving him unable to type, speak clearly, or remember the programming languages that had defined his career and identity. The gaming community faces similar risks, with streamers and professional gamers sitting for marathon sessions that turn their blood into sludge and their arteries into time bombs, all for entertainment and prizes that pale compared to the cost of a stroke. But it's not just tech workers and gamers at risk. Anyone who sits for prolonged periods faces this danger, including truck drivers, accountants, writers, call center employees, and millions of others whose jobs require extended sitting. The COVID-19 pandemic exponentially worsened this crisis, with remote work eliminating even the minimal movement of commuting and walking to meeting rooms, creating a perfect storm of prolonged sitting that we're now seeing manifest as a surge in stroke cases. Many of my post-pandemic stroke patients report that their sitting time increased from 8 hours to 12 or even 14 hours daily when working from home, with the boundaries between work and rest disappearing and movement becoming almost non-existent. The psychological component of this crisis cannot be ignored, as our society has conditioned us to view constant sitting and working as virtuous while taking movement breaks is seen as laziness or lack of dedication, a deadly cultural norm that must change. I've had patients tell me their managers frown upon regular movement breaks, not understanding that these brief interruptions could save the company millions in healthcare costs and lost productivity from stroke-related disabilities. The economic argument for addressing prolonged sitting is compelling, with American businesses losing an estimated $50 billion annually to stroke-related healthcare costs and lost productivity, much of which could be prevented through simple movement protocols. Insurance companies are beginning to recognize this crisis, with some offering premium discounts for employees who use standing desks or movement tracking apps, understanding that preventing strokes is far cheaper than treating them. But we can't wait for systemic change when individual lives are at stake every single day, which is why I'm providing specific actionable strategies that you can implement immediately to defuse the ticking time bomb of prolonged sitting. Create movement triggers throughout your workspace, such as placing your water bottle far from your desk, so you must walk to drink, or putting important files in locations that require standing and walking to access them. Use the Pomodoro technique, modified for health working in 25-minute focused sessions, followed by 5-minute movement breaks, which research shows not only prevents strokes, but actually enhances cognitive performance and creativity. If you must attend long meetings, suggest walking meetings for small groups. Stand at the back of the room during presentations or discreetly do seated exercises like ankle pumps and glute squeezes that maintain blood flow without disrupting the meeting. Transform phone calls into movement opportunities by using a headset and walking while talking with some of my patients, logging miles of walking during conference calls that would have otherwise been spent sitting motionless. The type of movement matters less than the consistency, with studies showing that even gentle movements like Tai Chi poses or slow walking provide significant protection against stroke compared to continued sitting. For those with mobility limitations, seated exercises can still provide protection, including arm circles, seated twists and leg lifts that maintain circulation without requiring standing or walking abilities. The timing of movement is crucial, with research showing that breaking up sitting every 30 minutes provides maximum protection, while waiting 60 minutes or longer between movements allows dangerous changes in blood chemistry that increase stroke risk. Night shift workers face unique challenges, as prolonged sitting combined with disrupted circadian rhythms creates a particularly dangerous combination for stroke risk, requiring even more vigilant attention to movement breaks. I recommend that night workers set hourly movement alarms and perform slightly longer movement sessions, 5 minutes instead of 3, to counteract the additional metabolic stress of working against their natural circadian rhythms. The temperature of your workspace also affects stroke risk from sitting with cooler environments, causing blood vessels to constrict and increasing the danger, while maintaining temperatures between 68 and 72 degrees Fahrenheit optimizes circulation. Hydration plays a crucial supporting role, as proper hydration keeps blood flowing smoothly, while dehydration thickens blood and compounds the dangers of prolonged sitting. Making regular water breaks serve double duty for stroke prevention. I advise my patients to drink at least 8 ounces of water every hour while working, using bathroom breaks as additional movement opportunities that naturally enforce regular standing and walking throughout the day. The type of chair you use can either worsen or mitigate sitting risks, with ergonomic chairs that promote good posture and circulation being essential, though no chair can eliminate the need for regular movement breaks. Consider using a stability ball for part of your sitting time, as the micro movements required for balance activate core muscles and promote better circulation than static chair sitting, though this shouldn't replace regular standing breaks. Compression socks, while helpful for reducing leg swelling during prolonged sitting, can create a false sense of security and should never be viewed as a substitute for movement, only as an additional layer of protection. The foods you eat while sitting can either increase or decrease stroke risk, with high-sodium processed foods worsening blood pressure and clotting risk, while antioxidant-rich foods provide some protective benefits. I recommend my patients pack healthy snacks like nuts, berries, and vegetables that require preparation and consumption away from the desk, creating natural movement breaks while nourishing the body with stroke-fighting nutrients. Alcohol consumption combined with prolonged sitting creates a particularly deadly combination, as alcohol dehydrates the body and affects clotting factors, while sitting compounds these effects into dramatically elevated stroke risk. Evening sitting after work often continues. The damage started during the day, with Americans averaging 4 additional hours of sitting while watching television, essentially doubling their daily stroke risk through recreational sitting. I tell my patients to use commercial breaks as movement cues, standing and moving during every advertisement, or better yet, investing in a treadmill, desk, or stationary bike that allows movement while enjoying entertainment. Sleep position after a day of prolonged sitting matters significantly, with sleeping on your left side optimizing circulation and reducing the risk that clots formed during the day will travel to the brain during sleep. Morning routines should include gentle movement before sitting for breakfast, or commuting with 5 to 10 minutes of stretching or walking, helping to clear any microclots that may have formed overnight and preparing vessels for the day ahead. The psychological resistance to movement breaks often stems from fear of appearing unproductive, but I encourage my patients to reframe movement as productivity insurance, protecting their ability to work for decades rather than risking total disability. Some of my most successful patients have formed movement accountability groups, with co-workers taking breaks together and encouraging each other to prioritize brain health over the false urgency of constant sitting. Technology can be either enemy or ally in this fight, with fitness trackers and smartwatches providing movement reminders and tracking sitting time, though they're only effective if users actually respond to the alerts rather than dismissing them. Virtual reality workstations are emerging as a potential solution, allowing people to work while standing and moving naturally, though these remain expensive and impractical for most workers currently. The fundamental issue is that human bodies evolved for constant movement, with our ancestors walking 10 to 20 miles daily while hunting and gathering, and our vascular systems never adapted to prolonged sitting, making modern work patterns fundamentally incompatible with health. Children are now developing sitting habits that set them up for stroke risk decades earlier than previous generations, with teenagers averaging 9 hours of daily sitting between school and screens, creating a future epidemic we must address now. I've started speaking at schools about the dangers of prolonged sitting, teaching children movement habits that could save them from stroke decades later. Though changing entrenched cultural norms around sitting remains challenging. The military has recognized this crisis, implementing mandatory movement breaks during long briefings and planning sessions after seeing young, fit service members suffer strokes linked to prolonged sitting during deployment planning. Professional drivers face unique challenges, unable to take regular movement breaks while operating vehicles. But solutions exist, including isometric exercises at red lights, calf pumps, while driving, and mandatory stretching during fuel stops. Flight crews and pilots have developed specific protocols for maintaining circulation during long flights, including ankle exercises, standing stretches during appropriate flight phases, and compression techniques that other professions could adapt. The legal profession, notorious for billable hours that chain lawyers to desks, is slowly recognizing that stroke-related disabilities end careers far more definitively than taking movement breaks, with some firms now mandating hourly movement sessions. Healthcare workers, ironically, often have the worst sitting habits during documentation time, with electronic medical records keeping doctors and nurses seated for hours after patient rounds, creating stroke risk in those who should know better. I've implemented standing workstations throughout our neurology department and mandated movement breaks during long documentation sessions, leading by example and showing that patient care improves when providers maintain their own health. The financial services industry creates particularly intense sitting pressure during market hours, with traders afraid to leave their desks even for bathroom breaks, but portable standing desks and seated exercises can maintain health without missing opportunities. Academic researchers often sit for entire days while writing papers or analyzing data with the publish or perish culture, creating stroke risk that threatens the very careers researchers are trying to build through constant sitting. The solution requires both individual action and systemic change, with workplaces needing to normalize movement breaks, provide standing desk options, and recognize that healthy employees are more productive than those heading towards stroke-induced disability. Some progressive companies have implemented movement meetings, where walking is required, stand-up signals during long presentations, and even treadmill desks in conference rooms, showing that innovation in work culture can save lives. The cost of implementing these changes is minimal compared to the devastating financial impact of employee strokes, with standing desks costing hundreds, while stroke treatment costs hundreds of thousands and potentially millions in long-term care. For those who say they're too busy to take movement breaks, I show them videos of my stroke patients struggling to relearn basic movements, asking if they're too busy to prevent spending months in rehabilitation centers away from work and family. The time invested in movement breaks pays dividends, not just in stroke prevention, but in improved energy, creativity, and productivity, with studies showing that workers who move regularly accomplish more than their constantly sitting counterparts. Seasonal variations affect sitting habits with winter months, seeing increased prolonged sitting as people avoid cold weather, requiring extra vigilance and indoor movement strategies during these higher risk periods. Holiday seasons create perfect storms of prolonged sitting through travel, family gatherings, and movie marathons, with post-holiday stroke admissions spiking as people abandon movement habits during celebrations. The gradual onset of sitting-related damage creates a false sense of security, with people feeling fine for years, while damage accumulates, then expressing shock when a massive stroke seems to strike out of nowhere, despite years of warning signs. Early warning signs of sitting-related vascular damage include leg swelling, varicose veins, occasional dizziness when standing, and numbness or tingling in extremities, all indicating that stroke risk is building and immediate action is needed. Regular health screenings should include questions about daily sitting time and movement habits, with doctors calculating sitting age, similar to how we assess cardiac age, providing concrete numbers that motivate behavior change. The stroke rehabilitation ward, where I round daily, is filled with formerly successful professionals who prioritized work over movement, now dependent on others for basic functions, their careers and independence destroyed by preventable strokes. One patient, a former CEO who spent 14-hour days sitting in meetings and reviewing reports, now requires help eating and toileting his empire meaningless compared to the basic functions stolen by a massive stroke caused by prolonged sitting. Another patient, a brilliant surgeon who sat for hours during long procedures and documentation, can no longer hold a scalpel steady, her decades of training and skill erased by a clot that formed during a particularly long sitting session. These aren't outliers or extreme cases. They're the predictable outcome of prolonged sitting, as inevitable as lung cancer from smoking, if the behavior continues long enough, yet entirely preventable, with simple movement interventions. The grief I witness in families torn apart by sitting-induced strokes motivates my urgent tone in this warning, as spouses become caregivers, children become nurses, and dreams become distant memories, all for want of 3-minute movement breaks. Recovery from massive strokes is measured in years, not weeks, with most patients never regaining full function despite intensive rehabilitation that costs fortunes and delivers limited results compared to prevention. The neuroplasticity that allows some recovery has limits, and dead brain tissue doesn't regenerate, making prevention through movement breaks infinitely superior to even the best rehabilitation after stroke occurs. Quality of life after stroke plummets dramatically, with depression affecting 85% of stroke survivors. Relationships strained by new dependencies and simple pleasures like reading or walking becoming impossible dreams. Suicide rates among stroke survivors are triple the general population, reflecting the devastating psychological impact of losing independence and ability. A tragedy compounding tragedy that movement breaks could have prevented entirely. The ripple effects extend to entire families, with children of stroke patients more likely to develop anxiety and depression, spouses experiencing caregiver burnout, and family finances destroyed by medical costs and lost income. Community support groups for stroke survivors are filled with regret about ignored warning signs and missed opportunities for prevention, with prolonged sitting being the most common risk factor patients wish they'd addressed. The technology exists to make movement breaks easier than ever, from smartphone apps to smartwatches to desk sensors that track sitting time, yet adoption remains low due to cultural inertia and misplaced priorities. Virtual assistants can be programmed to announce movement breaks, calendar applications can build in buffer time between meetings for movement, and even email programs can be set to delay sending during designated movement periods. The future of stroke prevention lies in making movement as automatic and socially expected as hand-washing with sitting for more than 30 minutes, becoming as socially unacceptable as smoking in public spaces. Some countries are already implementing workplace regulations, limiting continuous sitting time, recognizing that public health requires protecting workers from stroke risk just as we protect them from other occupational hazards. The American workplace must evolve to prioritize brain health over outdated productivity metrics that equate sitting with working, recognizing that movement breaks enhance rather than diminish overall output and innovation. Educational institutions must teach children from young ages about the dangers of prolonged sitting, making movement breaks as routine as recess, preparing future generations to avoid the stroke epidemic currently devastating their parents. Medical schools must emphasize lifestyle medicine and prevention more strongly, ensuring future doctors understand and communicate the critical importance of movement breaks, rather than simply treating strokes after they occur. The insurance industry must incentivize movement through premium reductions and coverage for standing desks, recognizing that preventing strokes saves money while improving lives, creating win-win scenarios for all stakeholders. Employers who implement comprehensive movement programs see reduced healthcare costs, decreased absenteeism, improved morale, and enhanced productivity, proving that stroke prevention through movement breaks makes business sense beyond moral obligations. The time for action is now, not after warning signs appear, not after a mini-stroke provides a wake-up call, but today, this hour, this moment, starting with standing up and moving for just 3 minutes. Every hour you continue sitting without movement is another roll of the dice, another spin of the cylinder in stroke, roulette, gambling with your brain, your independence, your family's future, for no meaningful benefit. The choice is stark but simple. Continue sitting your way toward probable stroke and certain vascular damage, or invest minutes per hour in movement that virtually eliminates this risk while improving every aspect of your health and productivity. As I close this urgent warning, I think of Jennifer Martinez, once vibrant and successful, now learning to use her right hand to brush her teeth while her left side remains paralyzed, her children helping her with tasks she once did effortlessly. I think of the hundreds of patients I've treated who would give anything to go back and take those movement breaks. They thought they were too busy for now, having endless time but no ability to use it. I think of the families destroyed, the careers ended, the dreams shattered, all by a preventable condition that required only the wisdom to stand up and move every 30 minutes, a solution so simple it seems almost insulting to the complexity of stroke. But that's exactly why I'm shouting this warning from every platform available, because the simplicity of the solution makes the tragedy of inaction even more heartbreaking and unnecessary. Your brain is depending on you to make this change. Your family is depending on you to stay healthy and capable. Your future self is depending on you to act now, rather than wish desperately for a second chance from a hospital bed. Stand up right now as you finish reading this move for 3 minutes, then set a timer for 30 minutes hence, and when it rings, move again, repeating this pattern that will save your brain and preserve your life. Share this warning with everyone you care about, especially those whose work requires prolonged sitting, because knowledge without action is meaningless, but shared knowledge that inspires change can prevent countless tragedies. The ticking time bomb of prolonged sitting can be diffused starting this moment, requiring no special equipment, no gym membership, no athletic ability. Just the decision to value your brain over any task that seems important enough to risk stroke. Years from now, you'll either thank yourself for heeding this warning and maintaining the movement habits that preserved your independence, or you'll join the ranks of stroke survivors wishing desperately they'd taken those simple breaks. The power is entirely in your hands, or more accurately in your legs, that need to move your body, that needs to circulate blood your brain, that needs the oxygen and nutrients that only movement can properly deliver. As a neurologist who has dedicated my career to treating strokes, I can provide advanced medical care after the damage is done, but I'd rather help you prevent that damage entirely through the simple act of regular movement. This is not just medical advice, but a plea from someone who has held too many hands of stroke patients, whispering their regrets, watched too many families shattered by preventable tragedies, seen too much unnecessary suffering from sitting disease. Make movement breaks your new, non-negotiable habit as essential as breathing, as automatic, as blinking, as protective as any medicine ever developed. Because your life literally depends on this simple action repeated throughout each day. The science is clear, the solution is simple. The stakes are your very life and independence. So please, for yourself and everyone who loves you, stand up, move, and never again sit long enough to let stroke steal your future. Thank you for reading this entire warning, and may every movement break you take from this day forward be a victory against stroke, a choice for health, and a gift to your future self who will remain capable and independent, because you acted today.